maybe. There we go.
Hey.
Live. It's happening. Well, let me make sure this works. This is our first time doing this, so if it doesn't work out very well, apologize.
Yeah.
Don't see anything coming up right now.
I know my phone just got a notification because I'm subscribed.
There it is. Okay. We're on. All right, you ready?
Yes. Okay.
Perfect. All right, so the reason that we are doing this today is because you have some questions about starting a creative community of some sort. So you want to go ahead and ask your first question?
Sure. So I know you're kind of in charge of this Making Midwest event, and you built that from scratch, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Awesome. And you already know, like, I'm from Texas, but specifically it's like kind of Houston area. And I feel like Austin is the kind of creative mecca of Texas. Houston is more like oil and gas and stuff. But there's still people like me out here. And occasionally, like, there was one time when we had a meetup. And I got super excited that I found out about this thing. And then I find out that it's like their first meetup they've had in a year. And I'm like, you know, it's cool to have annual stuff and everything, but other than that, it's like, where are my people? Cool to be like making an avenue where we can all gather and meet each other and hang out and stuff like that. So in general, with an event like Making Midwest, how did you pick out a venue, for example? Like, just starting out bare bones, how do you start building this thing? Where do you even go?
So starting from the beginning, so the biggest reason that I even started doing this in the first place was because I just moved to Columbus. I was in Los Angeles for 3 years before that, and you know, I've already kind of started doing my business like nights and weekends, and it was like, it's scary moving to a different city where you know absolutely nobody, and everybody always asks questions like, well, is there a market for something there? Like, will I even find work if I go to these places? And what I basically decided was that I'm not going to go somewhere where there is this large market. I'm going to go somewhere and I'm going to find the market, because there's a market everywhere. So really for me, it was, let's meet people, let's get people together, and let's find the market, and kind of almost created one at the same time, I guess. So the first event basically started whenever I got here, it was always kind of in the back of my head, like, one thing that Los Angeles does really well is that there's just constantly like events always going on. So it's really easy to just, like every week, basically, if you want to go somewhere, some kind of community, they're doing something somewhere, basically. And I knew I wanted to kind of take that idea to wherever it was that I moved. But the first step for me was to kind of just start meeting as many people as I possibly could, and not like the weird networking events where you pass out like business cards to people. Wasn't really interested in doing something like that. It was really about, you know, making real connections with people. And whenever basically, to get started, I just started inviting people to get coffee. And then once I kind of knew a bunch of people, then I knew it. Sorry, my dog is he found something outside. Maybe he starts barking. But once I kind of started meeting a lot of people, then it was like, okay, now let's try to do some sort of meetup where I can basically get all of these people together. So that gets us into your question now, which is the first step of finding a venue. So the first one I did, well, first of all, the goal is to not spend any money while doing these things. I had and still have to this day no desire to profit massively from doing events, because that's not really what my profession is. Especially at this time, like starting out, it was, you know, at this point I was already in Columbus for almost a year. It was probably like 9 months or so. So I was like, okay, I know a bunch of people now, and now I'm going to try to get them all together. And I did that by deciding to do this event. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to do this somewhere, and I'm going to have at least 60 people. That's, you know, going into it, that's what I was like. I know like 100 people now, and I'm sure 60 people would say yes and probably be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was first finding a venue that I could house 60 people, basically. And I ended up calling around like a bunch of bars and stuff like that, because so I don't drink personally, but I know that it's a pretty necessary thing for a lot of people to kind of be a little bit more social around people that they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I've always had that understanding. and my take on it is that, well, if they're a little drunk or buzzed, then it doesn't matter if I am or not. So it's like, okay, we just need one side of the equation, not two, really. So I started looking around at bars that had like availability of some sort, like that we could just either in like the main part of their building or had some sort of private room or something like that. And the first one, I'm pretty sure, I can't remember exactly how much I paid to reserve it, but there was a bar, a really small bar that had a back room, and it was like a really weird setup. It was just like this, just a room with walls and a door, and it's just open kind of thing.
Put them over there.
Basically, and like they had like 4 or 5 tables in it. Like I have no idea what the purpose of this room was, but it was kind of weird. But I was like, so I reserved that, and then whenever I got there, I was like, shit, this room is not big enough. Like this room can hold like 25 people tops. I'm like, we're gonna have 60 people at this thing. So then we ended up having about 12 people show up. And I was like, most of that night, I was like, man, this is kind of disappointing. Like 12 people? I was expecting 60. But I'm like looking around and I see everybody like just having like a legit like great time. Just meeting, like I knew everybody in the room for the most part. There was like other people that were like introducing themselves to each other, and I'm just like listening to the conversations. And I'm like, man, this is so cool to be able to connect these people. Like I had conversations with them separately, and I knew in my head that if they were to talk to each other, it would be just this amazing conversation that I would just want to sit there and watch. And that's basically what I did. So I was a little disappointed by how little amount of people were there, but by the end of the night, I was like, this is cool. I got to keep doing this. And from there, it really escalated quickly to where at that point, I'm going to go into the story a little bit. So from there, it was, okay, let's do something every quarter. And progressively, it became more and more work to do these every single quarter, because we kept adding things to what we actually did or adding stuff to the plans. So the first one, it was literally find a venue, done, and then make a little poster and share it with people. The second one, we again did it at a bar, but like a nicer bar, and had a nicer room. So we kind of like leveled up there, but had 15 people. So we gained like 3 people in this. So again, I'm like, man, like these people are having like a really good time like at this, and people are loving it. And I mean, I was loving it too, just to be able to connect these people. But in my head, I was like, again, I still expected this 60 people to happen. So it almost became like a challenge for me. Like, let's see what it takes to get 60 people in a room. The third event was whenever everything kind of started to change. And that's whenever I was like, okay, let's have people present. Well, there was one guy at the previous meetup that he was like, hey, there needs to be like more structure. Like this is cool, but it's 3 hours on a weekday, like after work, and you're kind of already exhausted from working, and it's a little it's a little exhausting, like just talking to people, especially people that you've never talked to before.
Yeah. That's what the meetup I went to was like. It was just like all around. And that time it was a lot of people, so even then it was cool that there were a lot of people, but then there's too many and it's like really overwhelming and you know, just kind of like whoa during the headlights, and by the end of the night I was exhausted.
For sure, and that's kind of how I am too. I wouldn't say that I'm an introvert by any means, but I wouldn't say that I'm an extrovert either. um, you know, I've gone to events like this before where it was like, you know, you show up somewhere where you don't know anybody else, and it's uncomfortable because you're like, what the hell do I do now? Like, where are the drinks? What time is it? You look at your phone a bunch because you're like, oh yeah, I got an email from Planet Fitness or something. Like, you know, you're making it look like it's important. Like, oh geez, yeah, I got to take this.
Yeah.
But so part of what I was trying to do was trying to find a way around that. Like, so having some sort of get together meetup that is comfortable for people, and that it's not just this awkward thing where you're trying to hand a business card to somebody. And to do that, there was basically a few things that needed to happen. One was there needed to be that structure. And two, we needed to make sure that this never turned into something that people wore suits to. Because that's whenever things just don't go the direction that I was going for anyway, you know? If it turns too businessy, then it would be less fun.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the one side that I always wanted to make sure was there, is that fun side.
Yeah. And not just like everybody has an ulterior motive in the room.
100%, exactly. So that's what I made sure that everyone knows. Like, this is not necessarily something that you're going to go to. You're going to meet somebody and you're going to get work out of it. It's happened a bunch of times, probably dozens of times. People have met somebody else and they've formed work relationships out of it. And that's totally cool. But what I try to do is tell everyone, like, hey, listen, like, you're only here to make connections with people, have conversations. Don't introduce yourself and hand them your business card in 2 sentences and say, hey, if you need help, please hire me. Because that's not nearly as effective as just forming a legit relationship with people. So getting back to that structure and that third event. So that third event was whenever I was like, okay, let's have people present. And then in between the presentations, we'll kind of have like a little break in between so people can get up and kind of chat with other people or the person that just spoke. My goal was to have one person speak. And I asked 4 people to speak, expecting just one of them, if any of them, to even say yes. Well, including myself, because I was going to give like a little brief kind of talk on what we're doing there. And everybody said yes. So I was like, oh crap, like now I got 4 people in 2 hours to have them present. And it's like, I don't know, I at that time I didn't really see anybody else doing stuff like that. It was mostly like 1 hour, 2 hour presentations. So it was a little scary kind of going into it. And just by changing the format of everything, we ended up having 30 people. So we doubled the amount of people that we had at this event by having that structure to it.
That's great.
And that's still going to go down as probably my favorite event that we ever have, because just kind of seeing things happen like in that 3 hour like span of time, you just see people like, I don't know, again, people like meeting other people and people making these realizations while they're listening to these presentations. And it's just a really special time, and really cool to see stuff like that. So what we ended up doing was having people present for less than 20 minutes, or I think it was 25 minutes, because that's what we've stuck with since then. I'm like, I know it's tough, but you only have a max of 25 minutes and then you have to stop.
Yeah.
And immediately people were like, well, I don't know if that's enough time. And it required them to put a lot more effort into what they were doing and to kind of chop the stuff that didn't need to be there. And all of the people that presented that night, I don't think that anyone had ever presented before that. Not like this anyway. I mean, like outside of like speech class in school.
Yeah.
And everybody did an awesome job. And that's when I was like, I came to this realization that it's like that format demands people to really put the time in to be good at this stuff. So it's not even something that I need to like keep checking in with them to see like, how's your presentation going?
Yeah.
And since then, again, I've never done that ever. Like I don't want to know what people present about because I want to show up and I want to enjoy it just like everybody else does. And it's just not necessary. I trust if I've asked people to present, it's because I trust them to do their thing, you know.
Yeah. And the 25-minute format really forces them to kind of condense their thoughts too, instead of just kind of like, I have the floor. Now I get to ramble, you know?
Exactly. And that's and then once I started doing that, I started watching TED Talks more often. And I'm like, man, like we're essentially doing like TED Talks because they only have a few minutes.
Yeah.
And they have to get right to the point. Like they can't rely on the fluffy stuff to tell a story. You know, they have to get to the story and basically get to the point really quick. And there has been people that have gone over on time, and that's a whole different conversation altogether. But that's kind of a tough thing, especially when you have like 4 people, or in the case of the next Making Midwest event, which we've since changed to an annual event, we have 40 people speaking over the course of 2 days. If one person goes over on time, oh my God.
You're done. Get out.
Exactly. But so after that third event, that kind of made the format that we kind of stuck to for a year and a half after that. So for 2 years total, we basically did this during a week for 2 hours. Well, it's usually it was a 3-hour event, and we would just kind of do like a social hour in the beginning, and then that middle 2 hours would basically be 4 presentations. And I tried to get people that were in different industries that could kind of speak on one theme, but since they're in different industries, they automatically have a different way of thinking about it.
Right.
So my focus was always on the person walking in, the person attending the event. Like, what would help them get the most out of this? And it got to the point where it's like, okay, does a designer that walks in here really gain a lot of knowledge by listening to another designer talk about things that they generally know about already? Like, maybe, but what I like the idea of better is, okay, let's have a designer walk in, and then let's have a film director talking about their creative process. And now what can that designer take away from that? I feel is a lot greater than, you know, the other way around, where it's, you know, just seeing somebody that you know already and listening to them say things that you already generally know. So we did that for 2 years. So also at that third event, what we ended up doing was that's when I was like, okay, I got to cut the cost of like renting a room at a bar, because all of the money that I made from ticket sales was going towards that. And my goal was to raise money to do something a little bigger than having a quarterly event at a bar, you know?
Yeah.
So to do that, I started asking people that own creative businesses if they would just give us their space for a few hours. And that was a pretty scary ask. But I knew it had to happen in order to kind of keep this growing. And because they would do it for free, and they'd become a sponsor for the event, essentially. And I would also let them, after talking to them, then I would basically let one person from that company do the first presentation on the night. And I was always a little bit worried that it would become too sponsory, because that's exactly, I created this whole thing to not be sponsory. So I was like, man, I gotta really be careful about that, because I don't want that to happen. And
I'm like,
just by giving them, oh, good.
sorry. As you're talking about this, I'm finding a lot of like similarities between Blend and a lot of like the good ways. I'm like pleasantly surprised to see that you're basically creating your own local version of it organically. Like it just happens. Like it doesn't have to be a whole uh, big name thing to happen. It could just be like wherever you are, you just make it happen. But the sponsor thing, what I heard about Blend number one was that it was very, you're familiar with the Studio Buck, and apparently it was very Buck heavy, and there's mixed feelings about that because we all like what they do in their work, but at the same time, it's like, is this a community event or is this a Blend event? You know, like a free advertisement for one thing, and I'm sure like people got a lot out of it. But when I went to the second Blend, it was a lot more diverse from host to guest, and I think we got a lot out of it. Um, but yeah, I see what you mean because you don't want it to be just like a free advertisement for a studio or something. You want it to be community centric so that they get something out of it, and it's not just like we are blank. Here's how we do things now. Be sure to call us for work.
No,
It's like, hey, what
exactly.
about me?
And that's always been the focus, is the content. Um, what I've told everybody that is sponsored, and for the quarterly events, we have one or two sponsors at max for each event. And what I would do for that is before it started, they would get a few minutes to say a little bit of something before we kind of got started. But even then, I made sure to tell everyone, like, hey, you can either be an ad or you can be part of the content. And people don't listen to ads, so you should probably choose
Right?
being part of the content.
Yeah.
So, and people know whenever they're being sold to. So it's like, don't do that. Don't even worry about that. Just the fact that you believed in this enough to provide, to give money to sponsor something like this, that says a bunch about you already.
Yeah.
So it's like, and that's kind of one of the big benefits of being a sponsor for something, is it tells your audience what your values are.
Right.
But that's, again, that whole like, you could either be an ad or you can be the content. That's what I tell everyone, even for the annual event that we have in a few weeks. It's tough because, so kind of going to Blend here now, doing a large event is very expensive. It can be incredibly expensive. Some people will spend between $40,000 and $80,000 to put on a 1 or 2 day event that lasts like all day. And I didn't know to that extreme at the beginning, but after a couple of events, it turned into this idea where it's like, okay, well, I want to have a 2-day festival. I think it'd be really cool because Columbus, especially, doesn't really have anything like that.
Yeah.
There are like other things that are similar, but not the way that I was kind of imagining it to be. So it was, from the beginning, it was basically, let's start out small and let's make changes. Let's tinker with this until it gets to a certain point, and then you basically have to make the jump. And that was also a pretty difficult part, is realizing when it's time to make that jump. Last year, I actually tried to do a Kickstarter to do this same 2-day festival that we're doing in a couple weeks.
How'd that go?
So I
awesome or not? You know, that's how it's supposed to be.
So the story with that is, at the time I was like, okay, well, I did a lot of math and I started looking at like the venues and trying to figure out exactly what we could do. So I did enough research for sure, because I wanted to make sure that if I put this thing out there, then everything needs to be 100% legit, accurate, and everybody needs to, like, I don't know, I guess to also see that this is a legit thing, because time that you're asking for money from people, I take that very seriously. And I don't think that most people on Kickstarter do. I don't think they realize that what they provide needs to be more valuable than people's money. So that was my complete focus. And I was like, okay, well, I want to make sure that whatever I do, it's going to be for as cheap as possible. And I came to the number of 16,500, which is way below that number that everybody else tries to do these things for. But the reason that I wanted to be low is because I wanted to, I guess, depend more on admission tickets than sponsorship. Because anytime that the sponsorship side outweighs the other side, then you start to listen to the one side more than the other. And the focus should always be on the attendees, like people actually showing up. It should, whatever happens, should always be 100% what they want. And it should not be that advertisement, right? So I ended up running that Kickstarter. I felt really good about it, made a little video, did a whole design package for it and everything. And they say that if you can get 30, or what is it? If you can get 10% of what you need in that first day, then it's pretty likely that you'll be able to, do the next 29 days or whatever and actually get to your goal. And I got like 30% the first day. And I was like, man, like this is awesome. Like this is gonna happen. And I ended up getting about 9,000 of the 16.5 that I was asking for. So in Kickstarter, you get nothing if you don't get the whole thing. Right. That's kind of part of the plan. Like I don't want to get $9,000 and then people expect me to be able to do something that's worth $16,500. Yeah. And that was I don't know. I didn't know how at the time I was pretty disappointed about it, obviously, because you put all that time into it. But I was kind of thinking about it before it started, and I was like, okay, so there's really no losing here. If I don't get the money, like if I get $0, okay, I get it. Like the community doesn't want it. Like I totally get it. That's fine with me. Like then I know at that point that this is not something worth pursuing. And then if I do get the money, cool, win. So I went into this thinking it's a win-win situation. But when you raise half of the money, like, what do I do with that information? Like, is this something that people want or not? So I kind of made the promise to myself where it's like, okay, it's got to happen, but Kickstarter is not the way. So I was like, okay, I get it. So now let's find a new way to do this. That was not this last January, but the January before that. And then it was this time last year where I was like, okay, in 1 year from now, I want to do an annual festival. Like, what do I need to do over the next 6 months before I tell people about this idea? And for me, it was, okay, well, it needs to be as cheap as possible. If I got $9,000 in pledges before, well, then I need to find a way to make this whole thing cost $9,000. That's basically what I took from that. So that was kind of like all the planning needed to revolve around that. And so before I wanted to tell anybody about this, I was like, okay, I need to have the venue. I need to have it reserved. And I need to have the headlining presenter. Yeah. So I was like, okay, so those two things I need to know before I mention this to anybody. The first thing I found was the venue. Ended up being like this. So it's going to be at this like kind of older theater that's just really cool, like has a ton of character. It's kind of small, like it holds a max of 250 people. So it kind of fit the whole idea of what we're doing, like something more about the makers and something more about character rather than being superficial or pretentious. Right. So I was like, okay, we got the venue. And as far as presenter goes, so it's called Making Midwest. And I was like, okay, well, I want to only have people that are from the Midwest present. That's kind of our difference between everybody else is that I think that, so after living in Los Angeles, there's a difference in personality between people from there, people from New York, people from Chicago, and people from Midwest in general are just different than people from Los Angeles and New York. Not necessarily in a bad way, but my thinking of this the whole time is that I want people to walk up there that people can really relate to. And again, I don't want those people to walk up there that are going to wear a suit and tie and give this like pitch. Wasn't interested in that. Still not interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so naturally, I went with my first choice was Aaron Draplin, where I was like, man, this guy, he personifies everything that we're doing. He's from Michigan, like he gets it.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, like the more I thought about it, I was like, he needs to be the one that presents at this thing. And I sent him an email. 2 days later, he's like, yeah, we negotiated for like a minute or two. And then a week later, it was planned. I was like, this is amazing. Like, he gets back to me super quick. Like, this is perfect. So I had the venue, I had the presenter. And so our last quarterly event, like I told everyone beforehand, like, hey, this is the last quarterly event that we're going to do. Everybody's like, what's going on next? I'm like, you'll have to show up and find out. I gave this little presentation about what we're doing, like the future of Making Midwest, and told them about what we're doing, and that kind of opened some eyes and got us a little bit of momentum. And I've just been riding that momentum for the last 6 months. We have a team of probably close to 10 or 12 volunteers. So it's not just me doing all the work now. Have some help, so that's pretty nice. But now it's kind of become, so we have this like external community of people that would always attend the events before, and they're really excited about this. People in the city are excited about it. People from all over Ohio are going to be there. And some people from like other parts of the Midwest. I mean, we've really been just targeting Ohio in general, because again, we're trying to start very, very small and build this into something as big as it wants to get. Like, honestly, I'm not really so much concerned about size anymore. It's really just about, is this valuable for people? So I don't know. I don't know how far away people are going to travel from. That would be cool if people traveled from out of the state. But right now I can tell you that our ticket sales are doing really well. And I'm hoping to sell out pretty soon, actually. And like I said, we have a capacity of 250. So it's pretty exciting to kind of see all this stuff. And so like I was saying, we have this external community, and we also have the internal community of like 10 of us that are working on all this stuff. And that's been a really cool part of this whole thing too, is whenever you do this stuff by yourself, it's difficult and it's a little lonely, which is weird, being lonely while doing something that's for so many people. But whenever you're able to work with other people on stuff, it's just a really cool feeling overall. So that was my little rant. What's your next question?
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's the basic story, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's a ton of information and really eye-opening, and it doesn't sound like it's necessarily that difficult. You just pick some people to reach out to and reach out to them pretty much.
Absolutely. So I would say that, like, if anybody wanted to start something like this, the first step is to start a meetup of 2 people, you and somebody else.
Yeah.
Which is usually a lunch or coffee meeting, right? Distracting everybody. So that's the first thing, is start to grow your network one by one. I honestly don't think that it helps to go to a meetup and try to meet a bunch of people. I don't think that works as well as just having coffee or lunch with one single person.
Yeah.
Because you're able to connect with somebody on a much, much deeper level if you can talk to them one-on-one. So I also have a video on the YouTube channel a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember the exact title of it, but I talk about kind of networking and going to networking events and how you can kind of make the best use of that time. And like, I do agree that networking events are good, but you just have to be careful about how you do it exactly. And like I said, I think that most people kind of walk in and they're like, okay, take my business cards and just kind of hold them in my hand, clench them as tight as I can, and
Yeah.
give out all of them. And I think that's a silly idea. I think the real purpose of doing those things and the real value is to meet one person. And really, what I think the best strategy is going to these networking events, meet one person, ask that one person to get a cup of coffee. Don't waste too much of their time there. You can spend 5 minutes having a short conversation at the meetup and just be like, hey, you know what, would you be interested in getting coffee like in 2 days from now, like at 11? And they'll either say yes or no. Most of the time they'll say yes. And from there, if you can have a 1 or 2 hour conversation with somebody, you can learn a lot about them, and you'll by default basically have to you'll be sharing a lot about who you are personally.
Yeah.
And that's how you develop.
I'm having like flashbacks with people that I met up with afterwards, like when the event was over and there were a couple stragglers like just hanging out in Vancouver. That was exactly what happened. It was like, who's in the area for breakfast? And you chime in, and then you go, and then you talk, and it's like, oh my god, it's something in common and stuff like that. It was great. But yeah, I guess in terms of growing it, what were your methods of getting the word out to people who didn't already know about the previous events?
Yeah, so the one big thing that I've relied on quite heavily is email marketing. So I use MailChimp, and we just kind of grow the list a little bit at a time. There's a little field on the website right now where they can sign up to receive updates. That's a pretty big thing for us. Social media is obviously huge. Really what it came down to was getting those first few people to show up. And then at that point it was, they'll naturally, if they enjoy themselves, they will naturally talk to other people about what is going on. And if they're not talking about it, then you're doing something wrong and you should probably change something. That's kind of what I took from it.
Yeah, that's true.
And after we're starting at the third event, we started recording all of the talks. And I think that was also a big part for us, because it's not about the talks. Like, showing up is not about just listening to people talk. So I'm more than happy to give that away for free. But the real value is being there with other people that are kind of going through similar things and being able to connect with other people and have conversations. So, so at the annual, if you hear any screaming kids, I apologize. At the event in a couple of weeks, we're recording 40, about, I think, I don't know, between 35, 40 talks. And then we're gonna put it out there for free for everybody at a certain point. And everybody keeps on asking me, they're like, that's crazy. Like, why would you do that? It's like, because that's not what makes us what this is. You can go on YouTube and see any talk you want right now. So that's not what this is about. It's about getting together with other people in a comfortable environment, really. But so as far as growing, it's a combination of a lot of things. There's a lot of things that didn't work and a lot of things that did work. It's really just a matter of trying and finding out for yourself. Like, I don't know, if you're a really good social person, have a lot of friends, this is easy. You just post something on Instagram to your 1,000 followers and you're like, hey, having a meetup, show up, boom, they will.
Yeah.
But I wasn't one of those people. I still don't feel like I am one of those people that kind of are really good socially. I wouldn't call myself a social butterfly of any sort. So there has been a lot of things that are difficult, but it's really just about kind of staying true to myself and not making myself too ridiculous in the things that I say or do or put out in the world. It's being honest and kind of hoping people respond to that.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing too. Also for anybody that's interested in starting any sort of meetup or festival, annual event, whatever you want to start, it's just make sure that your intentions are good, because whatever your intentions are, people will see that very, very quickly. There is an event. I'm not going to talk too much about it, But there was an event that somebody tried to do in Ohio also. And I've never really heard of them before, which is not a problem at all. But they were trying to start a conference, and they were trying to charge $300 a person. Now that's not that crazy. There's a lot of conferences and stuff like this all around the country that'll charge between $300 and $1,000 to $1,000 for admission. And most of the time it's because the cost of putting something on is just ridiculous. You know, like I said, it could be between $50,000 $80,000. So they need to charge quite a bit of money just to be able to do these things. But I don't believe that her intentions were in his or her were in the right place. And I think that a couple weeks before the event, they had to cancel it because nobody bought tickets. Now, I don't know exactly what happened. I don't know this person personally, but I can pay attention to Twitter and I can see what's going on. And I can see that this event obviously just never happened. But they got good speakers. There's something there missing, and I think it was that authenticity of why you're trying to get people together. Like if you're trying to get people together just so you can make more sales for your business, maybe there's a time and place for stuff like that. But it just leads into more icky conversations. Yeah.
Let's see. I don't know if I had any other questions beyond that, but
Okay. All right.
Like that's a good starting point for sure.
Yeah. So let me ask you questions now.
Okay.
So are you interested personally in trying to start something in your area?
I don't know. It's difficult because I'm not really in the downtown area of Houston. I'm like in the burbs, and so there's zero in my area specifically.
Yeah.
I'd have to drive like an hour to get to where the people are
Yeah.
at. So
I wouldn't let that stop you. I wouldn't let that stop you in trying to start something like this, because a lot of people kind of fall into that same category where they're like, I'm not really in like a major city. So that kind of thinking right there is why everybody ends up in New York and Los Angeles, because they think that's where they have to go. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think that you need to be in a big city. You can have a town of 1,200 people. And if you have 200 people that just love animation or anything else, like boom, that's all you need. It doesn't need to be in a big city. There just needs to be people willing to be part of the community, really. So I would even say, like, if you I mean, obviously, like, you know, driving an hour to something, that's not a huge deal. That's probably what most of the country has to deal with. Like, they're probably within an hour or so of a major city. So like if you had to do something in a major city, try it and see what happens, you know? You don't need to be from that place to start something. You just need to know a few other people, I would say, from that place that can either help you get the word out or just promise to be there. I think that's really the big thing at start is try to find, you know, 10 to 15 people maybe and ask them, like, hey, if I started something like this, would you show up? If they say yes, you say, okay, well, if I had it on this day at this time at this place, and they'll either say yes or no. And if they say yes, like, okay, just start doing it that way first, like starting those one-on-one conversations to build it. And then once you get to 10 people, or even 5 people for that matter, make it public. Make a little poster for it, spread it around everywhere, put it on Instagram, hashtag the shit out of it. I would say that's a pretty good way to go. Awesome. Anything else?
I don't think so. I think that was a good primer. And yeah, just thinking about the memories that I've had at a similar event and getting to, because I didn't talk with any of the people who actually started Blend while I was there, but now it's like this sounds like a really similar type of ethos and the type of community building aspect. So getting to talk to somebody who has the same like goals,
Yeah,
informative.
I think so. That's kind of getting into like another thing I'll talk about here for just a moment before we wrap up. Is the idea that whenever you go to these places, you see these kind of famous faces in your own world that like nobody else in the world knows them, but you see these famous faces, and then you're like, you kind of like lock up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, man, I would love to talk to that person. Like, I went to SIGGRAPH a few years ago, and you see Nick Campbell, and you're like, man, I'm gonna go up to him and I'm gonna give him like a big hug, and then you're like, that's weird. Like, don't do that. And then I just never ended up talking to him at all. And it's like, I don't know, you're kind of a little disappointed in yourself for not doing that. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I think that there's more value in not necessarily talking to those people, but to talking to people that are, this might sound bad, but talking to people that are a little bit closer in your level. Maybe that's really bad. I mean, don't not talk to those people. But if you're not comfortable, like, it's okay if you don't talk to them.
Yeah.
Basically, because meeting anybody is just as rewarding as that person.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely got what you were trying to say.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
I hope 3 people that were watching this felt the same.
Like, and at the same time, don't go and have that be the only thing you want out of the whole thing. It's like, you can't have your blinders on when we've gone through this whole effort of bringing people together, and you're like, no, leave me alone.
I think that's it. People get like this tunnel vision when it comes to this stuff, where they only see this one person, and like they walk into it and they're like, man, I want to meet this one person, and then it just builds up this anxiety, and you're like, you just can't do it at a certain point, or even if you do it, you just say something stupid.
Yeah.
So just be careful about that. Especially like going to stuff where you like see like a potential client, or so I've heard of people that like that. So they say if you want to work with a company, you just need to go where they are. So people will go to like meetups that like a creative director goes to from an agency, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna go to this place too because I know they're gonna be there, and then I'm gonna have a conversation with them. And they feel like they only have 2 minutes to pitch whatever it is that they're doing, and that's whenever it gets really awkward and uncomfortable. So it's like that's not the worst strategy ever, to be at the same place that somebody else is that you would like to work with. But again, it's about building relationships, not about selling yourself.
Right.
Yep. All right. Cool. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Hopefully that was good for everybody.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. We're going to do this again next week, and it's going to be a different topic. We'll see what it's going to be. We don't know yet. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.